Thanks for what you tried to do. Sorry we didn't win.
That's okay, Coach. Wait till next year.
Next on ITV, Nick Stewart presents Stories in the Night after the break.
I work from home and William and Pinky are always somewhere nearby. They eat Whiskas. They seem to like it. They obviously seem to enjoy it. I mean, William will even purr while he's eating. That's all they'll really eat. I think Whiskas is the best. I wouldn't give them anything but Whiskas and their mum.
Jane is about to find out that there's a really simple way to shampoo and condition her hair at the same time. With Dimension, a shampoo and conditioner, 2-in-1. Dimension, a shampoo and conditioner in one handy bottle.
It's his first day today. I wonder what he's like.
If he's ever so nice, a real gentleman.
The new boss starts today, boys.
Well, he managed it at BBT.
We needed an insider for this job.
What? Like yourself?
He's got an impressive track record.
He doesn't suffer fools, gladly.
Well, he took BBT to number 3.
But number 2 if you include South America.
I saw him, he's gorgeous.
He has a lovely smile. And he has a wife, too.
You don't think he's too young, do you?
Hard to say. It's a lot to take on.
There are some very big decisions to be made.
I think he's proved himself in that department, don't you?
That's a new Granada, isn't it?
Of course. It's the 2.9 gear saloon.
The new Ford Granada. Let them know you've arrived.
From Simplicity size 1 and 2 towels to Simplicity nighttime towels. From individually wrapped size 1 and slim towels to pant liners. Simplicity gives you the confidence to take everything in your stride. Simplicity.
Take everything in your stride.
When something's this enjoyable, why hold back? If it's delicious and light, it's delight.
Call Chatback on 0898 228 333 and make new friends all over the UK. Just dial 0898 228 333.
Surf Automatic has the cleaning power to remove really stubborn dirt and stains at low temperatures. To leave your clothes really fresh. So, for outstanding low temperature cleaning, get Surf Automatic in powder and liquid. Get surfing.
You won't catch me using a spot cream, because this is invisible. It works too. New Clearasil gel. Unspottable.
Hello, good morning. We've got the start of a new sports series at 4:04 this night time. The Channon and Ball video show takes a trip down soccer's memory lane. But now, Stories in the Night asks, is there life after death, or is death the final curtain?
Good evening. Welcome to Stories in the Night, where we try to get to grips with the amazing world of the paranormal. Throughout the series, we hear from the experts and from ordinary people who've experienced things that leave science struggling for an explanation. What happens to us when we die? That's the question tonight. Is there something which survives and goes on to another world, or is this life and this body all we've got? To help us decide, I'm joined by Barbara Smoker, President of the National Secular Society, who's convinced death really is the final curtain. Professor Arthur Ellison is a scientist who's convinced life goes on, for a while at least, in a world probably very similar to this one. Angela Rigg-Milner can go along with that and believes she has the proof. Her daughter Samantha died in a car crash when she was 5. One night, 6 weeks later, Angela woke up and is certain she not only saw her dead daughter, but spoke to her and actually held her as well. Angela, exactly what happened that night?
Well, as you have said, I had a car accident, and I felt that I had annihilated my daughter. I had no hope and no knowledge and no religious belief whatsoever, and so I was really totally in the depths of despair. I am a doctor's wife, and I hadn't ever taken tablets, tranquilizers, sleeping tablets, because we in our family had never believed in those sort of things. And so that I didn't particularly sleep very well. I found perhaps to get up and go into my daughter's bedroom, which I did on that particular occasion, and was happy to be in her room with all her things. And it was at 5:30 one morning, my husband came out of our bedroom and into our daughter's bedroom and said, "Well, come back into bed with me." We have quite a long corridor between my daughter's bedroom and our bedroom, and I walked with him back into our bedroom and into bed and looked at my teaser maid, and it was 5:30. But as soon as my husband had got into bed, he immediately fell asleep again, and which I'd found rather disturbing, thinking as he'd got me out of my daughter's bed where I was happier and into my bed.
So what did you notice?
Immediately nothing, but then I was aware of happenings in the bedroom. I saw nothing, and I found myself above my husband and saying, "John, John, wake up, Samantha's coming back." But at that time I hadn't seen...
How did you know that? How did you feel or sense that Sammy, your dead daughter, was with you in that room?
Well, that is something that I cannot explain. I can only say that that is what I felt, because I didn't see her at that point when I found myself above my husband, and I couldn't reach my husband, and I found myself then back on the bed again, and then the experience started happening.
So when you say you found yourself above your husband, I mean, what do you mean?
I was floating above my husband on the bed, above him, looking down on him and trying to wake him up. That experience I couldn't explain at that time. Since I have looked into it, I now understand that experience, but I didn't at that point. But then I found myself back in the bed, and then aware of the situation of my daughter standing in the corner unit of my bedroom.
Suddenly you saw your daughter standing in your bedroom. What did she look like?
Well, she looked as she always did. She had a very... she wore a nightie that I normally wouldn't let her wear, because it was her arms were bare and she'd be cold, and she was standing in a corner unit in my bedroom just before I go into my bathroom, and she was looking very bewildered. And I got out of bed, and I sat on the edge of the bed, which I think she was probably about 2 feet away from me. So I got out of bed, sat on the corner of the bed, and spoke to her. And she did look very bewildered.
Did she reply? What was the conversation?
No, she didn't reply. I said to her, come and sit on Mummy's lap, and she came. She didn't come straight away. I was aware, or I thought there was someone there that had given her permission, because she was reticent. She didn't come straight away when I said, "Come to Mummy, darling." But then someone, I feel, and I saw no one, someone said, "Well, maybe you can come," or whatever. But so then she came, and she sat on my lap, and I held her on my lap, and her head here, and she had long hair, and I said, "But you're solid and you're real, and I can feel her now." And she was as solid and as real as you and I. Her hair and her nails, I felt her nails, and her toes and her feet, everything about her. And she just lay there. She was quite passive. And then I said to her, I mean, it was just such an incredible feeling of relief, because that she was there.
How do you know you weren't dreaming, though? It was early in the morning.
It was 5:30. Yes, it was 5:30, and these are the things you think about. I wasn't dreaming anyway. One can go into that a little later. And so I said to her, come into bed with Mummy and give me a cuddle. And I took her into bed, and my husband was on my right, I was in the middle, and she always pulled away slightly from me, and her head was high on the pillow, and I cuddled her, and it was the most wonderful, it was such an incredible, wonderful feeling of relief. I just cannot ever forget that feeling.
You said you felt her on your lap and stroked her. When you got into bed,
yes.
was she still solid?
Oh, totally solid. She's completely solid and as real as you and
Did
I.
you feel
I
warm?
can feel her warm and just like you and I. And I can remember saying, but you are real, and I haven't killed you. You are alive. I mean, I wonder perhaps they're alive, but anyway.
That's interesting. You'd lost your daughter. 6 weeks later, something appears, looks like your daughter. To you, she's solid. What do you think she was?
Well, I didn't think anything at that time. I was so at the depths of despair that I just felt that there was nothing. I mean, I just had no religious belief anyway. I had never had any experience in life, never had any psychic experience, and I just thought I'd killed her, and she was dead, and I was just sitting in my bedroom day after day, just dying. I think you can just give up, and you can just, the pain is so terrible. I mean, the pain is so awful.
Did she talk to you at all during all this?
She didn't talk to me then, but then when I took her into bed and I cuddled her, and it was such a lovely, lovely feeling, and then afterwards, I can remember my husband was on my right and I was in the middle, she on my left, and then after a while she said, I'm tired. And then she said, I've got to go now. And then I said, come back and see Mummy again, won't you, darling? And then she'd gone, and there was just this sort of light. And I looked at my teeth maid, and it was 20 to 6. And then I said, John, wake up, Sammy's been back. And he thought, I think, that he had had a dream. But I don't dream, and I have never dreamt of her since.
Right. Now, Arthur, you've heard what happened. Now, have you any questions at all for Angela?
I think that was pretty clear, Nick. You had what is called technically an out-of-the-body experience first, didn't you?
I've learnt so much since, of course.
Yes, and of course you couldn't waken your husband from an out-of-the-body state. You were not touching him physically, as it were, or speaking physically. That is important. The other important point, it seems to me, is the one Nick made, that you got back into bed.
Yes.
That is very important. Two things. You were in bed at the time, and you couldn't awaken your husband. I am clear on this, Angela.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
So what do you think was happening there, Arthur?
Well, let me say this first. The importance of that experience is very clear to Angela, and it's changed her whole life, and I wouldn't dream of denigrating it. It's very important to her. The evidence for survival of death is exceedingly good. I am as convinced as I am about almost anything, and nothing is 100% certain in this life.
Did what Angela see, was that Sammy?
So what Angela had technically is called a lucid dream preceded by a false awakening. In other words,
explain that.
A lucid dream, this is not uncommon. A number of books have been written about it, a particular one by Celia Green. A lucid dream is a dream in which you have all the memories of your past life and you know what you're going to do tomorrow and so on. A false awakening is when you think that you have awakened in bed and you're in your ordinary room. This is not uncommon.
So are you saying then that this wasn't Sammy, that Sammy isn't alive in some other realm?
I'm suggesting that Sammy probably is alive in some other realm, but this was not scientific evidence related to that. This is what we call a lucid dream preceded by a false awakening, and lifting Sammy's arm and feeling her warm and solid and so on. That's exactly like pinching yourself in a dream to see whether you can awaken yourself.
Right, so you're agreeable to the fact that Sammy could be and probably is alive in another realm, but it wasn't necessarily what Angela saw. Now, Barbara, do you have any questions here for Angela?
Well, I've got a lot of comments, of course, and in the interpretive kind. But the only question really is, now, Angela, you said you had since learnt a lot about out-of-body experiences and so on since this incident. And I wondered what you now thought about, for instance, the substance that you held, the warm body. What did you think that was? I mean, obviously, she no longer had a warm body, objectively. So what do you now think? What is your interpretation of it now?
From that point, well, I do find that video because I can so feel her. In actual fact, I think that on that point she had to come back, and I had to accept her on that level because that's the only way that I could understand. I understand now that the body is so totally unimportant that it's only the spiritual essence that I need. But I mean, I'm farther ahead on that sphere.
But at that moment, you thought it was like a physical body.
Well, yes, it was. I think it was something that was needed. I mean, for hallucinations and things, I searched further about that because I felt that this is something I wanted to understand. Why should I have been given this knowledge? And knowledge it is for me, whatever anyone says. She was there. Unfortunately, I've never dreamt of her ever since, which is very sad. I would love to dream about her. I'd love to, in every way I'd love to dream about her, but never once have I, which I find awfully sad.
So Barbara, Angela isn't, or she is convinced it wasn't a dream. What do you think was going on?
No, I don't really think it was a dream. In one way, I'm a little less sceptical, strangely enough, than both Angela and Professor Ellison, because I myself have had what are called hypnagogic hallucinations, and you're not actually in bed asleep. And I'm quite ready to believe that Angela actually did sit on the edge of her bed, and especially with her experience of seeing the teas made and the time on the teas made, because I've had this sort of experience.
Was she conscious? Was she awake at that
I think it's a sort of, she is partly awake. Her judgment is not awake. Part of her mind is awake, and it's like sleepwalking in a way. I'm quite ready to believe she was out of bed and so on.
Are you ready to believe, though, that her dead daughter was there?
Well, of course not. No, this is a psychological experience. It's what's called, I think, a crisis apparition. It is simply psychological. Of course, it's the worst kind of bereavement altogether to lose a child. Not a small baby, but a child that you've already grown to know and love and have a relationship. This is the worst, your own child to die. And of course what makes it even worse is if it's been an accident and if you've had some part in the accident. Worst of all, and sympathy goes out to Angela terrifically for this. And I think it does explain the whole thing, because her mind couldn't possibly come to terms with the death of her daughter and the way it had happened. And in sheer self-defense, the mind creates an apparition to try and help you to come to terms with it.
So for you, it's a sort of hallucination that Angela has had. Now, Arthur, why, in principle, though, do you believe in the possibility of life after death, that Sammy is somewhere in another realm?
Well, because the evidence is so good. I'm not in the business of belief systems. I don't have any particular beliefs about anything. I usually make up my mind on the basis of the evidence. And as I said earlier, the first thing is that we cannot prove anything 100% certainly, except mathematical theorems, perhaps.
So what is this evidence that has so convinced you?
The best sort of evidence for survival of death is not messages coming through mediums. That could be explained by telepathy. The evidence for telepathy is exceedingly good. The best sort of evidence, as I say, nothing is 100% certain in this world. The best sort of evidence is what we call in the literature the cross correspondences. And this involved a number of psychics, mediums as the spiritualists would call them, who did automatic writing. Automatic writing is where the psychic holds a pencil on a piece of paper and then it writes without their conscious doing it. That's automatic writing. Now, automatic writing sometimes produces jingles that are of no particular interest, but sometimes it's of great interest, and it appears to be sometimes as though it is messages from some other entity. Now, in the case of the cross correspondences, a number of different mediums in different parts of the world who didn't know each other produced bits of automatic writing related to classical Greek literature about which they had no knowledge. Each bit of writing was not understood by the writer, and it dealt with substance of which they had no knowledge.
So it's a bit like a jigsaw then?
Yes.
Different
These
mediums have got
various
different
bits of writing. Each was not understood by the medium who produced it. But to give one example, the piece of writing would be ended with, "This is F.W.H. Myers. He was one of the founders of the Society for Psychical Research who then died. This is Myers. Please send this to the Society for Psychical Research in London." So these various mediums in different parts of the world, Rudyard Kipling's sister was one of them in India, Mrs. Piper in Boston was another. They sent these bits of incomplete material, cryptic material, to London. Nobody understood them, and you get two bits which didn't fit together, and then a third bit would come from someone else which provided a clue to the others.
So what happened there was that this Myers character, who had died then, had transmitted, you think, from the other side, bits of this message to these mediums, who had then sent independently these bits to London, where they were assembled into a coherent message.
Well, that's what it looks like.
Now, there's a scientist accepting that.
I think he's very gullible. Many scientists are, actually. I would need far more evidence than that to overthrow the whole basis of reality.
Of course I'm not gullible. You know, the people involved in assessing this were the Right Honourable Gerald Balfour, later Lord Balfour, a classical scholar who was the Prime Minister, as you know, later. Sir Oliver Lodge, who was a very distinguished scientist.
They're distinguished names there, Barbara. Aren't you impressed?
In their own fields, they were no doubt very sensible, rational people, but they allow themselves to be. They don't use the same criteria at all when they're assessing this sort of thing, which they want to believe in.
You have to explain in some other way, don't you? You can't just say they were gullible.
I can explain it in one word: fraudulence. There is at least one person in that chain of messages who was deliberately interfering with the messages or whatever.
How do you know that? Do you know that for certain?
It's so obvious that this is the... you don't take some absurd length of interpretation of something when there's a simple interpretation. This is, I mean, it's what's called Occam's razor, and it is far more simple and probable. I mean, on grounds of probability, it's infinitely more probable that this is the explanation.
So why don't you accept the principle that it could have happened?
But it couldn't have happened.
So, but why? What was the principle behind it?
Because, well, it comes down to the question of identity and that you know, what makes you you, and nobody can possibly still be conscious without a living brain, because the seat of consciousness is a living brain.
So to you, all we are then is this physical body and the brain. There is no mind.
What do you mean by all? Of course there's mind, but the mind is simply the functioning of the brain. And of course consciousness is such a marvellous thing. And we are capable of all sorts of things, but we're not capable of living beyond the death of our own bodies. That is for certain. Except in the sense of influence.
I'm interested in the facts and trying to understand them. Barbara will forgive me, that sounds more like an obsessional neurosis to me. She knows, without any proof, that a human being is no more than an electrochemical machine with a little computer at the top. Therefore survival is impossible, and therefore this must be fraudulent. Now these people who were involved in the cross correspondences, and there were hundreds and hundreds of them going over 30 years, were some of the people of the highest integrity in the country.
Now wait a minute, at the turn of the century, that was when spiritualism or spiritism or whatever you like to call it was at its height. That was the peak, and there were so many mediums. There was never a single one that wasn't caught out in fraud.
We're obviously not going to agree on this, so I'm going to have to move on.
They were all caught out in fraud at some point in their careers.
One of you is convinced, one obviously isn't, so we will move on at that stage. Because I want to come back to you, Arthur, and let's assume then that there is life after death. What is it like?
Well, Professor H.H. Price, who was a professor of philosophy at Oxford, wrote an interesting paper in the 1930s about if survival is true in some form or other, and as I say, the evidence is very, very good, and I speak not as a believer, but as a hopefully open-minded objective scientist who's looked at it carefully over many years. Professor Price wrote a paper called accepting that if one accepts this evidence that we probably survive, what could the next world be like? And he argued that clearly we don't have our five senses still feeding in information to us in the ordinary way. What do we have? Well, all the information we have appears to indicate that we have our memories and our desires. Now, what sort of world...
Does that mean because I want a house in this world and live in a nice country house, there'll be houses in the next world?
Yes, it does indeed.
But how do you have memories without memory cells in the brain?
Because the mind is different from the brain.
That is where the crucial point, you disagree on that.
All the greatest neurologists, and I've known one or two of them, Professor Pribram, Sir John Eccles, would agree the mind is different from the brain.
Assuming that, tell me what is in this world. Is it like if I step out of the studio, in the other world, there will be Tottenham Court Road, cars, people in houses?
Well, the next world looks as though, as it's constructed from our memories and our desires, both conscious and unconscious, according to Price, and interestingly, according to the Hindu literature, they believed in this for
They believe in reincarnation.
Years. They believe in reincarnation too, but that's not tonight's subject.
We have bodies, we have clothes, we have houses. I mean, do we have sex? Do we have children? Is there crime? Is it exactly like this world?
Well, it's not exactly like this world. It looks as though, as it's a function of our memories and our desires, it will be a reflection of what we have made of ourselves during this life. And near-death experiences are becoming quite common these days.
But basically, if I can just pin you down on this, it would look something like this world.
For most people, it would be very like this world. Now, but if they were rather nice people, it would be a rather nice version of this world. So we have bodies. It's an illusion, really.
But we have bodies.
Yes, of course we do.
Now, but where do the bodies come from?
What do you think
we don't have physical bodies. We can't have physical bodies because we're not in a physical... we have perhaps other bodies, but they're not physical bodies. We leave that behind.
So, Arthur, what do we have then? Do we have physical bodies or...
Well, our bodies, the dirt would be just as dirty as it is here, and our bodies would seem just as solid. You know,
I want to move to Barbara on this one, if I may. Now, is that the sort of realm you think's in store for us when we die?
Well, I think when you're dead, you're dead. Exactly. No, I think that you survive only in the sense that you will live on in other people's memories, in the influence that you've had. You can have all sorts of...
So what do you make of that image then? Why does man
it's
want
wishful
to
thinking.
have that image?
To use Churchill's phrase, it's wishful thinking. People want to believe that they are not going to die. They want to believe that people that they've loved who've already died haven't really died and that they're going to meet them again sometime. And this is such a strong desire that they actually go on believing it.
Well, Andrew, do you think that's true? Is that what happened to you?
No, I don't think that. I'm very practical. I really am a practical lady, and I've had 4 children, and fortunately, I have another daughter not long after Samantha was killed. My life has always been very practical, but I know that I've left the physical part of my daughter behind, and she is with me spiritually. I know it.
So
I feel it.
You're convinced there's life after death, but briefly, how has it changed you as a person?
Oh, it's totally changed me because I feel so secure. I feel so happy. I I'm the most fortunate woman in the world because I know without doubt there's life after death. I know it. Whatever, I would love to have that hallucination or that dream again that you think that I've had, but I know that whatever you say, that's not what happened to me that morning. It was an experience.
So basically, you're convinced
Oh,
that's
totally.
where...
But of course it was an experience.
That's where we have to leave it,
Yes,
I'm
it was
afraid.
an experience. We all agree.
What it indicates, we're disagreeing, but an experience which has changed you anyway. All of you, thank you very much indeed. Well, I hope we've managed to shed some light for you on one of the greatest questions of existence, what happens when we die. Unfortunately, though, we can't help with individual cases, but if you think you've got a problem and need help, then see someone like your doctor or your local church. From Stories in the Night, good night.
Next week, Stories in the Night returns at 2 o'clock. Hello again. Programmes still to come include Video Fashion, America's Top 10, Friday the 13th, a new sports series, the Channon and Ball video show, and our final nighttime programme is 50 Years On. Right now, though, it's time for us to hand over to the studios of ITN for a look at the very latest news headlines.
The Libyan news agency Jana has confirmed that a fire has broken out at a chemical plant in Rabta, 50 miles south of the capital Tripoli. The State Department in Washington had the first reports. They say the plant is used to make chemical weapons. One American television report says the plant has burnt to the ground. It's believed to manufacture mustard gas, and last week the White House said they did not rule out military action against it. But President Bush has denied any involvement in the incident. Last year, the Libyans allowed cameras into the plant to prove, they said, that weapons weren't made there. 2 game park wardens have been arrested in Kenya following an investigation by Scotland Yard detectives into the murder of the British woman Julie Ward. The 2 officers were invited to take over the inquiry by Kenya's president. Police believe Miss Ward was held captive for some days during her visit to the Masai Mara Game Reserve before being killed. There's more trouble for the government, with 2 new opinion polls showing the Conservatives way behind Labour. One poll gives Labour their biggest lead for nearly 20 years, 21 points ahead of the Tories. Another poll in the Daily Mail shows Labour would easily win the Mid-Staffs by-election. The news comes after a defeat in the Commons. Labour says the government is visibly disintegrating.
Backbenchers were openly arguing with cabinet ministers on the floor of the House of Commons in between the votes. Scenes of a government which is in absolute disarray, in absolute turmoil. A government which I believe is in a near to terminal state.
Doctors have been told by the British Medical Council that they can help childless couples to have babies using surrogate mothers. But the BMA has drawn up strict guidelines which disqualify friends from volunteering to act as surrogates. For some couples, this is the preferred option when the woman is infertile, like Beverly Ashmore.
My friend offered to do it for me because she's emotionally involved, understands the situation, understands our feelings, our desires to have a child, and to expect a surrogate, a total stranger, to do it without payment, without having any family involvement is impossible to imagine.
That's all for now. We'll have more news later.
Hello again. In half an hour's time here on Thames Television, Saida Garrett hosts America's Top 10. But first, Video Fashion takes a look at the Italian designers of Milan as they head into the 90s.
Video Fashion News brings you the latest and greatest style makers from around the world, wherever fashion is breaking. In this issue, the Italian designers of Milan head into the 90s with soft, slouchy style. Gianfranco Ferre's soft-tailored looks. Clean knitwear at Laura Biagiotti. An explosion of color from the Missoni. or modern classics at Max Mara. And Jenny's spirited suits. Slouchy, sporty dressing at Krizia. And sizzling showstoppers from Gianni Versace, taking Italian style into the 90s. This season, the Italian designers herald the new decade with